So a little intro. I'm actually an LCF alumna and CSM alumna. I did the old foundation degree in designer pattern cutting at LCF, based at mostly at Curtin Road. And then I went on and did a PG cert in innovative pattern cutting at St Martin's. So I'm very much a designer pattern cutter by training. I worked as a pattern cutter in the industry for several years before launching my own label, which ran from 2007 to 2015. So I have experience owning and running a business too. Before that, I actually did a science degree in Australia, and I worked as a radiographer in the NHS. So I've come to write about fashion tech now because I guess I have knowledge in both areas, and I'm comfortable with both scientific concepts as well as the creative and technical processes around fashion design and manufacturing. I founded in the last 5 years a platform called Techstyler, which was the first platform dedicated to talking to innovators in the fashion industry who are using science and technology to provide new solutions, not just for tech development, but also for sustainable transformation. I'm also the director of Bria, which is a sustainable fashion innovation agency. And I launched Bria after I closed my label in 2015. So I shifted my focus from making and selling products to textile and digital design innovation. I'm also a senior contributor at Forbes, which is, I guess, the main capacity that I'm in today in giving you this presentation, having spoken to lots of industry leaders, as I previously mentioned. So I'm going to launch into what I'll be covering. There's just 4 key areas I want to cover with you all today. They're not by any means all of the impacts of COVID-19, but I think they're the ones that are most profound and also possibly the most relevant to you as an audience. So the first is the shift from offline to online. Second is the shift from physical to virtual, or as some are terming it, in real life, IRL to URL. Sustainability as a concept for marketing and materials, transitioning to a social and environmental responsibility conversation rather than just sustainability, and technological growth, which has been steadily occurring, but has now ramped up with a lot of new innovations in the last couple of months. So let's zero first off on offline to online. So there's been an e-commerce growth, which is obviously no surprise to any of us since physical stores have been closed. But that e-commerce growth has been sort of 40 to 80%, depending on the product category. And what's really important about that is the way that e-commerce fashion is done is very different to the way that bricks and mortar fashion is done. And what I mean by that is bricks and mortar ordering is typically high volume and long lead time in terms of making the product and getting it into store. E-commerce traditionally has much smaller order volumes with a much faster turnaround. So what that means is the industry's had to rapidly adapt to this different way of buying. And that's thrown up a lot of questions about fast fashion and manufacturing in Asia in very high quantities, which of course have not been able to be sold during this period of lockdown. So this e-commerce growth is driving new conversations about how many collections should be made a year, how much volume should be in those collections, and also implementing digital tools to speed up production and perhaps moving production to Europe. What's also happened is there's an unprecedented amount of data being collected on our shopping habits because we're doing it online. So there's a lot of real-time data being collected that's giving lots of insights to both tech companies but also brands as to shopping behavior. And this is a really useful thing because it helps drive not just new technology development, but decisions around what to produce and in what volumes in terms of fashion garments. AI and digitalization has ramped up for the reasons I've just mentioned. The opportunities to be faster in the fashion industry when digital solutions are used have been proven because companies that have digital solutions in place, like digital prototyping and sampling, have been able to continue working, while other companies that don't have those digital tools in place have been suffering from a complete lack of sampling and development due to factory closure. So I mentioned already smaller order volumes and shorter lead times. And I had an interesting conversation with the founder of a fashion brand called Ganni, which some of you may know. It sells very well on all the big e-commerce platforms, Farfetch, Matches. It's a top-selling fashion brand for most retailers. And what they said to me was that they have shifted quickly to a larger number of collections per year, but with fewer styles and fewer volumes per style. So they're hedging their risk or mitigating their risk by scaling back and increasing frequency, so that they can test products before they go into very, high quantities. Also, what they've built into this new offline to online selling method is the use of the same fabrics every fourth collection. So they're building in the use of offcuts and unused fabrics on this sort of repeated cycle, so that they don't need to order fabrics with a long lead time, frequently throughout the year. The last point in this offline to online is manufacturing on demand. And what that means is that companies like Unmade and also Platform, which have created digital dashboards that allow brands to launch a purchase order or launch a tech pack following on from a purchase order and send that straight to the manufacturing hub, particularly where whatever the product is digitally driven, like digital knitwear or digital embroidery. They're finding much more interest and uptake of these digital solutions as brands try to push forward products that have this digital and agile aspect to them. So manufacturing on demand allows short lead time and the use of materials that are already in stock. So second is physical to virtual, and this has been getting a lot of airtime. I've covered it extensively on Forbes, spanning from how some fashion students are using their skills that they've developed in Clo and in Browseware software to start making virtual garments as a final presentation mechanism for their degrees, right through to AI companies who are building out digital models based on physical models and presenting virtual runways. So this is a really exciting area of explosion right now, and it really comes from the fact that there's physical lockdown and fashion companies still want to do business and fashion students still want to present their work. One of the most profound shifts here is the ability of certain companies to provide digital prototyping and sampling. So some of you may have heard of companies like The Fabricant. They're able to take 2D paper patterns, digitize them, and then create beautiful 3D assets that can both drive production, where Lecture and Clo are used for garment cutting and that kind of thing. Lecture and Gerber are used for garment cutting and that kind of thing. But also create really beautiful 3D assets that can be used on Instagram for promotional purposes, or even in virtual showrooms to help buyers to understand which styles to purchase. So that's been really, I would say, game-changing. And companies like The Fabricant have seen a huge increase in demand for their services, and are frankly struggling to keep up with that demand. What's really interesting too about the shifts and the kind of adoption of the systems that people like The Fabricant are using is that they link into digital manufacturing and the progression of Industry 4.0, which essentially means the use of automation in the fashion industry. And I had a really interesting conversation with one of the premier denim manufacturers in the world. It's the only B Corp certified denim manufacturer in Asia. And they're introducing automation on their production floor in order to support social distancing, because the traditional methods of production at the production line don't allow for that. So they're stepping up automation in order to deliver on the products needed by the industry, but while keeping their teams safe. And obviously having the 3D sampling and prototyping that people like the Fabricant do enables the implementation of that kind of automation far more easily. Also, this physical to virtual shift in the last few months has opened up lots of new opportunities for agile fashion businesses and also new graduates. At my innovation agency, Bria, we've had a student doing an internship with us who has been using Clo throughout his 3 years of his BA. He's graduating this year. He's actually a tailor. He worked in the fashion industry for 4 years before starting his BA. And he's going to launch a new business that's digital only, designing and creating skins for gaming. So his passion has been using his manual pattern cutting skills to create beautiful digital design, but he now sees an opportunity to tap into the growth in platforms like Fortnite and other games to sell his designs there. So I guess for new graduates who are coming out, it's a challenging time, but it's also a time of opportunity. I'm just going to play a quick video now, which demonstrates for anyone who hasn't seen it before, the process of using a paper pattern and translating that into a 3D asset using a variety of different softwares. This is something we created for London Fashion Week last season, but it shows, this is me with one of my old paper patterns from about a decade ago from my my fashion collections, and sort of laying it out in the usual toile cutting manner.
If for some of you guys, probably the video is not very smooth. So the video is in the creative playlist to watch it later on if it's not very smooth on your screen.
Apologies if it's not too clear. I'll just, while this is running, I'll just sort of talk through what's happening. Basically, we took photographs of the paper patterns using a leveling device on a smartphone, uploaded them into Illustrator and did a live trace over the top of them, and put in the scale in centimeters, and then imported that into Clo 3D and snapped those two Clo 3D and snapped the 2D paper patterns together to create the silhouette on our avatar. And we then applied the original fabric textures from the original physical garment that I'd made some time ago, and then began tweaking the design in 3D. So importantly, tweaks in real time, like, adding a couple of centimeters to a hem length, or, adding a little bit of volume on the sleeve head and things like that are very quick, and they amend the pattern in real time. So it's a really important tool for fashion designers to quickly iterate and avoid lots of toiling. And this is the last clip here. This just shows what you can potentially do. Hopefully this is smooth enough. What you can potentially do once you've created those static 3D assets, you can animate them and turn them into a fashion presentation of some sort. So that's just a little snapshot of the workflow as it may be, using a number of different pieces of software. So another industry example of this physical to digital transformation is Helsinki Fashion Week, which is happening in July, and it's going to be the first ever fashion week that is fully digital in terms of all of the collections being created in 3D. So using a process similar to what I've just shown you, and then presenting them in an animated form. So this is a really exciting shift that will potentially catalyze a knock-on effect around the world of this sort of 3D digital fashion presentation. And importantly, Helsinki are creating what's a portal basically for not just presentation, but also collaboration between designers and sale of product. And it's product that can be digital or physical. So product that could go into physical production, but would be presented and bought from those digital assets. And just another quick, because I've mentioned them, a quick video which shows what the fabric has been doing for some time, and just the level of quality and power, actually, of the imagery. The realism here is what's most striking, I think, and it's what's put paid to any concerns about whether or not it seems high fashion enough and sort of true enough to the way that materials actually move. Okay, I'm going to move on to 3 now. Sustainability, transitioning to social environmental responsibility. What's happened here has been reported on extensively by McKinsey, who have done a lot of consumer research in this area in the last couple of months. And what they've found is that because of the media coverage of what's happened with COVID-19 and the resulting change in climate, so the clearance of some of the pollution over some of the biggest and most populated cities in the world, for example, has made sustainability and climate change a far more tangible concept, where before people didn't really see it around them or couldn't really understand its magnitude. That has now changed, and that's now leading to new questions about the sustainability of the fashion industry and whether fast fashion and large volumes of production are responsible, and whether we actually want to move back into that broken way of working after COVID-19 allows us some level of normality. Also, the supply chain disgraces that have happened in countries like Bangladesh are now public. So we're all very aware of what's happened since brands have started cancelling orders for products that have already been produced, and what effect that's having on garment workers. So that's now very much in the public eye. What's also happening from a brand perspective is this shift in decision making around the frequency of fashion shows and trying to cut down on the amount of sampling and development that's done, because obviously it comes at a huge cost. And underpinning this is obviously the need to save money due to challenging economic times. But brands like Gucci and Dries Van Noten have announced that they will reduce the number of fashion shows. But I've asked a question recently in a Forbes article whether this will actually reduce the amount of development and product launches that happen sort of off the fashion show radar, because brands typically drop products every few weeks in order to keep sales flowing, and that may still happen. So there's a bit of a question over whether those sustainability claims will actually materialize, you know, in terms of design, production and manufacturing. The next important point is a Gen Z tendency that previous generations don't have, to ask questions and demand transparency over product origins and impact. I think this is, I guess, a digital native tendency as well, where there's an expectation of being able to find information online about anything that they so choose. So brands are ramping up their discussions about the source of their materials, the impact of their materials. Companies like Adidas have just partnered with Allbirds to tap their transparent and sustainable supply chain, which puts a carbon emission figure on every single product that they make. So moves are being made by companies in that area to be more open and forward about their carbon impact of their products. So that's one of the articles I've written on the Bangladesh crisis in particular, where billions of dollars of production have been cancelled and many garment workers have lost their jobs. So the final one is technical growth, shifting towards rapid technological innovation. So there's a few drivers here. One of the key ones is software advances. So as the industry has sort of grappled with continuing business where physical lockdown has prevented sampling, software companies have seen an increase in interest in their solutions, and that's driven them to establish new partnerships with other tech partners to provide new solutions that really help during this crisis. And I'll show you an example on the next slide of a 3D development where Browseware and Adobe have come together. This is a sort of unprecedented collaboration between tech giants, which is really promising. Another is 5G, which is enabling a lot more functionality for smartphone users. So where the creation of personal avatars, for example, has been tricky in the past and has required sort of high res videos and a lot of manipulation, this is now shifting. A company called Big Thinks is now allowing the creation of personal avatars in browser for retail using just a front and side photograph of the shopper as well as a selfie. So it's becoming a lot easier to sort of transition towards using digital fashion as we find it easier to create our own personal avatars and do virtual try-on. Also cloud computing for enhanced processing power. So companies like Microsoft with Azure solutions are developing new platforms for fashion designers to help them enter into digitalization regardless of the size of their company, and that's powered by cloud computing. Another very important advancement in the last few months is free access to software. So Clo3D and Browseware have given free subscriptions to those who want to upskill, and also free excellent support training and workshops online for those wanting to learn how to use those tools. So that's been a fantastic catalyst for people who are in lockdown, and I guess maybe some manual pattern cutters who want to sort of dip their toe into the next generation have been able to dabble during lockdown. So this is just an example of the partnership between Browseware and Adobe Substance. So the image on your left shows the use of the Substance toolkit, which allows application of physical print techniques. They've put into the software solution, I think, the 8 or 10 top used print techniques in the fashion industry, so that they can be trialed digitally to negate a physical sample and strike offs. On the right hand side, you can see what the previous print option was within the Browseware software. So obviously the 3D development is great, the textile render looks good. You can imagine it's possible to determine whether or not the fit and the silhouette is correct, but it'd be difficult for a designer to approve that version on the right without having the actual final print application visible. So that's it. I don't know. I tried to get through a lot of content for you all because there's so much to talk about. I don't know how we're going time-wise, and whether anyone has sent in any questions yet. And just while we're waiting, they're my details on the screen if anyone wants to get in touch.
Hi, Brooke. Hi. Thank you so much. That's really, really super insightful. That was really enjoyable to watch. There was one question from Alexa. She's wondering about how long it takes for a finished pattern going from a perfect pattern to simulation to perfect simulation. How long it takes for rendering and making?
Yeah. So the example that I showed in the Bria video took us a couple of days, but we weren't on the clock. And we were doing that for the first time with knit fabrics that I designed and made in Italy using 4 different yarns. So there were a lot of intricacies, sorry, in that textile that we were looking to replicate. What I'd say is that a lot of the 3D software has swatches, and it's possible to upload data from I guess you could say standardized fabrics that speed that up. So it is possible to do what we did in the Bria video just in a matter of hours.
Yeah. I just to add to that, also what I've noticed from students and also working in the industry is the longest, the time that takes the longest is fashion people coming from fashion to understand the workflow, what it takes to design 3D simulation. It's often, you either come from a fashion industry, from pattern technology, or you come from a 3D artist or 3D simulation, and the two are not. It hasn't been like a good flow between the two. With better software, better technologies, more collaboration between the two industries, and more educational courses, workshops that can teach the people coming from fashion how moving them to 3D simulation and the difficulties with 3D simulation. I think if there's a clear path, a lot of students will be able to pick up those technologies quite easily.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the reasons we did that video and presented it at London Fashion Week last September was to demonstrate what the workflow looks like.
Yeah.
Just to make it a bit more tangible. And, the software that we used is readily available. There's nothing proprietary about it. You can get it on a student subscription to Close, £20 a month. Blender's free.
Yeah.
The barrier to entry is low. It's just providing that introduction. And I remember when I did my degree at LCF, using CAD, and just those first steps to try to do technical drawings on CAD was it just felt so slow and difficult and complex. But I think once you're introduced to the workflow and you understand what capability it gives you, it's really powerful.
Absolutely. So I know we're running out a bit of time, but just one more question I'm dying to ask. After the lockdown, do you think it's back to normal, like back to business with all the brands and the manufacturing, or is it changed forever?
Oh, I think it's changed forever, but I would also caution the kind of commentary that says that we won't consume in the way that we did before. We won't buy fast fashion. We won't do mass production, because if anyone saw the news about people queuing to shop at Primark on Monday, you'll understand what I'm saying. There's the issues in the fashion industry run far deeper than we sometimes give them credit for. They're about social equality. They're about earning power. They're about diversity and race. They're about culture. There's all sorts of factors that come into play. So it will be different, but not completely different.
Completely agree. Yeah. Brooke, thank you so much for your time. This has been an absolute pleasure having you here.